Hello everybody and welcome back to another CB Showtunes tutorial. Now today what we're going to be doing is we're going to get into the zombie death state. So what we want to do is make sure that these zombies die whenever we shoot them. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The first thing we want to do is go over to our scripts folder and we're going to create two different scripts. We're going to right click and we're going to go over to create and press C# script. The first one you're going to call damage, the second one you're going to call stats. Now we're going to go into our stats script first, and we're going to roll up to the way top. So, as you can see, we have like 4 different variables. One is a float for HP. The second one is a bool for is dead. The third is our animator. We will just want to be able to set animations, so you know. We also have a public collider for our collisions to disable. Now this is set as an array, so we can have multiple different collisions out. If we want to disable them, we can. Alright, so we're going to go over into a void late update. Now for this, we're going to simply just ask a question. We're going to say, if we're dead. Right? If we're dead, we want to be able to set a trigger inside of our animator, and we want to set that is dead. Now make sure to keep an eye on how that is spelt, because that is very important. We also want to grab our animator, and we're going to set our attacking state equal to false. So if we were attacking, we're no longer capable of attacking. Then we're simply going to check our disable collisions. So if our collisions to disables links is greater than 0, in other words, if we have 0 slots of collisions to disable, we're not going to run this and it's not going to waste any time. If we do have more than that, though, then we're going to run a for loop. Now, for this for loop, we're just going to be grabbing our collisions to disable. Then we're going to enable every single one of those, or set them to be disabled. So basically, collisions to disable, we're going to grab the I value. .enabled is equal to false. Now at the bottom we have a public property called void damage, and inside here we're going to have one type of float, and we're going to call that amount right there. Now what this does is we're going to simply say, okay, we want to take this amount away from our current HP. So we're going to say HP minus equals that amount. Then we're going to ask a question. We're going to say if our HP is less than or equal to 0. If that's true, then we're dead. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay, so for our damage script, on the other hand, it's very simple in comparison. We just have a float for damage. We also have a string for target's tag. Now, the damage is obviously to how deal damage. Target's tag is equivalent to what sort of target do we want to hit. So if it's the enemy that's dealing damage, we want the target's tag equal to player. But if it's the player that's dealing damage, we want the target's tag equal to enemy. Now, right here we also have a void on trigger enter and a on collision enter. Both of these are pretty much similar, so I'm not going to go over them both. You can check out which one you want to use, or if you want to use them both, it's up to you. But the gist of this is we're going to check if this object has the stats component, and we're also going to check if its tag is equal to our target's tag. So if both of those conditions are met, then we're going to simply grab this property and simply deal damage using that. Alright, so now to get out of our scripts, let's go into Unity. Now the setup process for this is very simple. Go over to your zombie AI. If you have not created this, I would advise you to go back and check out my previous tutorials on setting up your enemy. But if you have, follow along. Simply open up that prefab right here, or go over to your prefabs folder and double click it from there. Now I like going into my scene view whenever it comes down to this, because it allows me to be able to visually see what's going on. Now the first thing we want to do is add in our stats script to this object, so you can either drag it in using this right here, or that right there, or you can simply go over to add component and then just type it in. Now for this stats script, we want to set the HP equal to 1. We're going to leave is dead as it is, and our animator, we simply need to find the object with our animator on it and simply drag it and drop it on there. As for collisions to disable, we want to be able to make sure that we disable, like, say for instance, the damage collision, as well as the collision that we have on our zombie. So for this zombie, I actually have this capsule collider, which I added just inside, or just today really. But for this capsule collider, all I really wanted to do is basically make it to where if our player runs into it, or if we want to deal damage, we need something that it can interact with. So we simply have this here. Boom, boom, boom. Let's go ahead and let's see. Yeah. So let's go ahead and make sure you just simply drag this into this collisions to disable. But I also want to be able to add one more. Because we also want to be able to deal damage using our right hand. So make sure that you do open up your skeleton as well. Roll down to where you find the right hand. And you're going to add a sphere collider. And this is of course set as is trigger. And you can edit this the way you want it to fit around that hand. Mine was set to a 0.1 on the X, or the center at least. And the radius I set to a 0.1 because 1 was way too big. Also make sure you do have your damage script attached on here. I set it to 1 and my target's tag is equal to player. Go back over to your normal zombie or your zombie root, and you know where we have the collisions to disable. We're also going to grab that right hand and drag it onto that collisions to disable. And the reason why is because whenever the zombie's dead, we don't want it to accidentally deal damage whenever the player runs over it. Okay, so the last thing we need to do on this enemy is we want to be able to add this tag. So make sure that you select this tag. If you don't have this enemy tag, simply go over to add tag, press this plus key, write in enemy, and boom, you're done there. Okay, so now since the zombie has all that good stuff set up, let's also go over into our animator, and we're going to set up a couple things. So on your parameter, simply add a plus, trigger, and simply type in is dead. Like I said before, make sure this is spelled exactly the same way as it is spelled inside of your script. Next, simply create a empty state. So empty state, call that the death state, and from there, simply right click from any state, make transition to your death state. You can give your animation here, or if you don't have an animation, try to find one and then put it inside there, or simply use a default animation for it. Now, for this transition, go over to the settings. You're going to set can transition to self as false. Then you're going to roll down and set the condition. So if you don't have this condition here, simply press this plus key, select the is dead, and that's all you need to do there. Okay, so the last thing we need to do on our AI is you need to go back over to your base AI control script. From there, you're going to add at the top require component type of stats. Then we want to simply call that stats here inside our variable functions. You're going to cast this object. So inside the void start function, you're going to say stats is equal to get component stats. And then from there, on your update, all we need to do is add this right before all of our motion and our animation. We're going to say if our stats.is dead, so if we're dead, we're going to return. We're not going to run any of this if we're dead. Alright, so now since we have that all done, we're going to head back over here and we're going to set up the bullet. So the bullet is actually way super simple in comparison to the AI because, you know, the bullet's already done. So we're going to go to our prefabs folder, select our bullet, and from there, all we need to do is add in our damage script. Because if I'm correct, we already have the sphere collider attached. So if you don't have the sphere collider, simply just go over to add component, type in whatever collider you want to use, and yeah, just set it to is trigger, or, you know, it doesn't have to be a trigger. But from there, simply just type in or add your damage script, put in the amount of damage, the target's tag, and then press play. And here we go. Like so. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out some of my other videos, and I'll see you guys next time.